Well, g'day and welcome back to Reality Check. I'm your host, Ross Coulthart, and what an intriguing week this has been. On the 6th of June, maybe we should call it Pentagon D-Day, Disinformation Day, the Wall Street Journal published a story entitled "The Pentagon Disinformation That Fueled America's UFO Mythology." One of the reporters, Joel Schechtman, touted his story as a bombshell, boasting that this Wall Street Journal investigation had spoken to 24 current and former US officials, scientists, military contractors involved in the inquiry, as well as reviewing thousands of pages of documents, recording, emails and text messages. I think this Wall Street Journal story will go down as one of the last gasps of the UFO UAP cover-up cabal's desperate attempts to put their finger in the torrent of leaks now threatening to expose their dirty secret. It's one of the daffiest, wackiest attempts ever by the national security state to explain away the growing evidence for the mystery of anomalous phenomena that is now being far more frequently reported in our skies. It's clear that much of the sourcing for this investigation came from the former head of the Pentagon's UFO investigation efforts, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, the immediate past head of AARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office in the Pentagon that supposedly investigates UFOs. This was Dr. Kirkpatrick's big chance to get square with his many critics, to use one of the most influential papers in the United States, the august Wall Street Journal, no less, a pillar of the financial establishment, to put a stake through the heart of what are now multiple first-hand allegations, witnesses alleging that the United States has secretly recovered non-human alien technology, and that there's been a multi-decades-long collaboration between those in the know, in government, the military, the intelligence community, and a select group of private corporate aerospace companies involved in working with this retrieved tech. I don't think it's any coincidence that this dim-witted, moronic, block-headed Wall Street investigation appeared online at almost the exact time that another former senior Pentagon official entrusted with investigating UAPs, Jay Stratton, went loud and hard at the SCUAP conference at Huntsville with a detailed speech elaborating on past admissions he's made as a former director of the Pentagon's UAP task force that he is a first-hand witness to non-human intelligence. Quote, "I have seen with my own eyes non-human craft and non-human beings," says Jay Stratton. That's pretty definitive. You will never read that anywhere in the Wall Street Journal, which has made it very, very clear with this story that it is happy to be a craven, toady mouthpiece for the national security state. According to the Wall Street Journal and Kirkpatrick, we are being asked to seriously believe, drumroll, that the United States government has been lying to us about a cover-up about aliens for decades. Sorry, wait a sec. The US just said that it's been lying to us about a cover-up of aliens for decades. Well, duh, yeah, exactly. Of course they have. Why is that news? Well, it turns out the twist in Dr. Kirkpatrick's mea culpa is that while he was at AARO, he supposedly heroically discovered that the US military was creating the very conspiracy theories it has spent decades debunking. The way he told it to the Journal, new US Air Force officer commanders were indeed formally inducted into what was presented as a classified briefing about the US's possession of flying saucers. They were in fact shown photographs of an anti-gravity manoeuvring vehicle, and they were told that this super secret operations code name was Yankee Blue, and that it was devoted to reverse engineering alien technology. Terrified officers were threatened with prison or indeed death if they spoke about it, explicitly warned never to mention the program. Many were ordered to sign non-disclosure agreements, and Yankee Blue, of course, was supposedly a smokescreen for genuine, highly sensitive new weapons development programs. The story went even further, attempting to debunk what has clearly been a thorn in the side of the US Air Force's credibility on this absurd cover-up for decades. The evidence of multiple witnesses, including Captain Bob Sallis, that in 1967, at Malmstrom Air Force Base, a giant UFO hovered over a missile silo and deactivated 10 of the thermonuclear missiles he was in charge of. The Wall Street Journal's reporters claimed Kirkpatrick had discovered this was, in fact, a secret test of an electromagnetic pulse, an EMP pulse, to test the effect of EMP energy on America's strategic nuclear missile deterrence. Yes, we are meant to believe that the US Air Force would be stupid enough to put a massive electrical discharge through 10 of the most dangerous weapons on the planet without knowing the effect that that might have. So what does this Wall Street Journal story really mean? What the hell is going on? Is it really the death knell, as Dr. Kirkpatrick clearly hopes, for the claims of a UFO UAP conspiracy cover-up? Or is it more likely what I suspect it is, disinformation masquerading as disclosure? To help us analyse this story, I'm joined today by Rob Heavily and Mario Woods. Rob is a medically retired structural and design engineer with 20 years of experience managing heavy commercial and government building projects. He's a former Cold War era US Marine infantryman, and he now conducts independent research into UAP, NHI-related government materials, both declassified and open source. His work has focused on obscure technical aspects of defence infrastructure, and he spent a lot of time investigating this EMP testing claim. Mario Woods, I've long wanted to get on the show. He's a former US Air Force Security Police Staff Sergeant who, with a colleague in 1977, was on duty at Ellsworth Air Force Base in North Dakota, protecting the nuclear missile silo facilities there. He and his colleague witnessed a silent, glowing object hovering near the base perimeter while he was stationed at a control tower. Shortly afterwards, with another policeman, he drove towards the hovering UFO, which was, he says, the size of a Walmart building and as long as an aircraft carrier. Mario witnessed beings and a strange ball-like object that shot around their vehicle. Both men suffered 5 hours of missing time, and they, and this is the most intriguing part, they and their vehicle were found parked on a dam way outside the base, 10 miles distant from where they'd encountered the object. The thing that's always got me was there were no tyre tracks around the muddy area around the vehicle. It looked like it had just been dropped into place. Mario and his colleague were threatened and told they had to sign an NDA about this extraordinary incident. So, gentlemen, I'm hoping you can solve the mystery for me. Are we meant to apologise to the US national security state for getting it all wrong for the last few years? It's all been a big misunderstanding. They were just lying to us to protect their weapons programs. Rob, let's start with you. What do you say to that?
Addressing the Wall Street Journal article, from an engineering background, I recognized that the equipment that they profiled, I went searching for the document that they sourced that from, and it wasn't put out for contract until June of 1971. So the Malmstrom incident was in March of '67. So there's no way that that instrumentation could have been fielded and tested. So then Joel, when he was presented with these documents on Twitter, presented another document from what he thought was 1967, but that wasn't put out for contract until June '67, and the incident happened in March. So there again, the EMP testing didn't occur in the context that they stated, and it wasn't on a live site.
So let me get this right. Mario, maybe you can help me here. As I understand it, the type of EMP, electromagnetic pulse testing, that the Wall Street Journal is relying on to support its contention that what Rob Salas saw wasn't in fact a UFO. It was, in fact, he didn't say he ever saw it. What he experienced was reports from above ground saying that there was a big hovering red orb object, UFO, hovering over his silo, and there were multiple people on the ground who were saying they could see this. The explanation is that this was some kind of electromagnetic pulse test. What is required, from what you know now from the documents that Rob has been able to get hold of from the archives, which, as Rob has made the point, post-date, they didn't actually come into existence, this technology, until well after this incident that happened in 1967. Describe to me what would have been required to have been erected at the site for this, in fact, to have been an elaborate electromagnetic pulse test.
Well, first, the actual size of what we're discussing here is tremendous. You couldn't have placed all that on 4 deuce-and-a-half trucks. It would have taken more than that just to get it to the fence line. Evidently, that object hovered over the front gate of the facility. Now, there you had 6 security policemen on duty. And I know one of them, the flight security controller, was extremely upset. So, but you also have 2 officers that are off duty, a chief cook and a facility manager. So in total, you had six security policemen, 2 officers downstairs, 2 officers upstairs, 3 more people. So you have, 11 people total, I believe. And for this thing to be erected.
Before you get into that detail, so there are multiple first-hand witnesses saying...
It'd have to be. It would have to be, yeah.
So they're saying it wasn't an electromagnetic pulse test. There was certainly no briefing of an electromagnetic pulse test.
That just couldn't take place. So much authority would have to be done. They would never do an exercise like that with active nuclear weapons in our arsenal. They would never do that at a facility like that, at Oscar Flight. They wouldn't do it anywhere.
Yeah, and I know you guys...
I mean, you might as well take a Seawolf submarine and put it at 200 feet and flash it and see if it destroys whatever it can do. Are you going to take that chance? I mean, it's the same. It's equivalent.
Yeah. So I know a lot of you guys who've had these experiences with UAPs at missile sites. You all talk, and so I know a lot of you actually got together and shared your information together. So you've actually spoken, I understand, to Bob Salas in your time. You've been able to hear his account. And you've heard his account. You've heard the account of what people saw. Let's just deal with it very slowly. What do you think of the explanation that these people were all confused, that they didn't see what they say they saw with their A1 eyeballs, a UFO hovering over the site, that what they in fact failed to see were presumably some kind of concrete tower that would have had to have been erected to do this EMP test, according to the documents?
There is no way an object or anything could be erected that size right outside of the fence line, right over top of the gate on that facility without being seen. And how long would it take to set something like that up? When you're pouring concrete, setting pillars, placing a Marx generator in line with whatever it's got to be done. I mean, I don't know the real designs of the whole EMP thing, but I do know from the weight, the size, and the entire texture of the whole scenario is just way out of context. It just would never, that could not happen on a missile site. Too many people are there to see it that are armed.
I'm going to come to Rob in a moment. I want to go through the detail of what the documents from this EMP
Oh,
testing program actually show. But before we come to that, I want to get a clear statement from you, Mario, about the broad idea of what your training tells you about the implications of putting essentially a huge electromagnetic discharge through a thermonuclear missile site. In your wildest dreams, from what you know of how places like Malmstrom were run in those days and how you experienced it at Ellsworth Air Force Base, would the US Air Force, in your remotest dreams of what was possible, have ever, without knowing about the consequences of what would be involved, put an electromagnetic discharge of that magnitude through something as grave as a multiple thermonuclear missile site?
no way. They're just absolutely, in no way will they ever do that. Joint Chiefs of Staff, that whoever would have to approve that or even think about it. Further, it couldn't be erected in a half hour. It would be seen. Believe me, that would be a real serious threat without any communication whatsoever to the on-duty people.
Rob, would it not have been an absolute gross dereliction of duty for any senior officer in the US Air Force to have endorsed any kind of operation like that? And should there not be now an inquiry into the grave implications of the fact that, according to the head of the Pentagon's UFO investigation program, we are being asked to seriously believe that the US Air Force did one of the most reckless things in world history? It risked the deployment of multiple thermonuclear missiles in the mid-1960s by putting a massive electromagnetic discharge through a nuclear missile site. Isn't that the most significant admission if what Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick is saying is true?
Yes, because there's no precedence to testing live ICBMs, armed warheads, with an EMP pulse to just see what's going to happen if we spark this off. The mock up alone required 5 towers with 2 footings each of 3,200 pounds of concrete with anchor bolts that would have they assembled the A-frames on the ground and then erected them. So they're 1,000 feet long, 30 feet in diameter with each hoop on each frame. So that would have taken days for the concrete setup. It required cranes to lift the A-frames into place. And you're talking about 1,000-foot system. And then this giant Marks generator that has a maximum of 60 feet above the object that it's being testing on. And that's just complete gross dereliction to try and live test a nuclear ICBM site of 10 warheads.
But Rob, the Wall Street Journal reporter promised us that he'd gone through thousands of documents in this bombshell investigation. Just take me through the detail. You said it earlier, but I want you to go through the detail. The incident at Malmstrom Air Force Base that Bob Salas was a witness to, that the Air Force chose to selectively try and debunk, that was in 1967. What is the earliest evidence of the use of EMP testing on these kind of nuclear missile sites?
Oh, the contract, the first one that was profiled in the article was put out for contract, where it was awarded contract in June of 71, and then the initiation of fulfilling that began in October 71. So when he
So
was
that's
presented with
four
those,
years. 4 years after Malmstrom is the first ever recorded incident in the US Air Force documents. And more importantly, these are the documents that Mr. Shetman from the Wall Street Journal chose to rely upon in order to make the assertion that this was an EMP test, didn't he?
yes, but the initial contract doesn't even mention ICBM sites. It's just a generalized canned specification to test hardened facilities. Because with my engineering background, we did high-end commercial and DoD contract buildings for overpressure, under pressure, and which is entirely different from the blast resistance and the MP hardening. So the contract in question in the article profiled those two different specifications to test for the over under pressure and the EMP testing, but
Now,
but
I want to
never
get
indicated that it was for an ICBM site.
And so, to get it very, very clear, the documents which well post-date, the years after when they were first initiated, one, the contract didn't contemplate thermonuclear missiles being used in such a test at all. That would be grossly irresponsible.
Mhm.
But more importantly, it didn't begin until years afterwards. As Mario has said, you would have needed, and as you've said, you would have needed these absolutely gigantic 60-foot tall, multiple thousand-ton concrete pillars in order to
Well,
execute this test.
the steel A-frames, but they had to pour the footings that were five
Yeah.
foot by 4 foot by 2 feet deep. It takes a couple, 3 days for that concrete to harden with the eye bolts. Then they assemble the metal frames with the hoops in it, and once they're all assembled, then they pull up the whole 1,000 foot span with a crane to get them vertical, and then you have an antenna that's basically 30 feet in diameter and 1,000 feet long, and then you have to set the generator over the top of the facility. This huge multi-story size generator that has a maximum of 60 feet above the facility.
Now, this would be funny if it wasn't so serious, because from when you read the Wall Street Journal report, it's quite clear Sean Kirkpatrick gloats and boasts that he briefed the Director of National Intelligence at the time, Avril Haines, the person who is America's intelligence czar, that this kind of thing was happening. More importantly, he briefed her on the disinformation operation that had been run by the US Air Force, basically where US Air Force officers were being told that this was a classified program, Yankee Blue, and
Mhm.
that this was all a big lie. In and of itself, I think the gravest implication to me is that this cockamamie bull story has been fed to the Director of National Intelligence by the man in the Pentagon who was responsible for investigating the UAP program, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. God help us, it looks like Avril Haines bought it. She seems to have accepted this explanation. What are the implications for that in terms of the level of deceit that is clearly going on? I just don't see how anyone can possibly believe that this deliberate disinformation program is part of a strategy just to hide weapons programs, when clearly they have been briefing officers for decades and decades and decades into the existence of a alien technology retrieval program, and now they're trying to have to cover their butts to explain to the president and the senior people in intelligence why these people are now coming forward. They're also having to try and explain the evidence of good men like Colonel Bob Salas and Mario Woods, both of whom have had incidents at nuclear weapons sites. What are the implications from either gentleman that wants to comment on this? What are the implications about what this says about the way in which senior levels of the intelligence community, the people we, the public, entrust to protect the public interest in all of this, are being deceived about this issue?
Well, let me further expand on what the article stated. Kirkpatrick's reasoning for why Salas and et al. Were never informed of these on-site testings was because it's classified and they didn't want the Russians to know. But the report from 19, initial report in question was never classified. It was open source. It was a generalized contract, never classified. So that in its face was incorrect. That Kirkpatrick is advancing, and then Joel tried to put out another document to preempt that one when he was presented with these documents showing that it didn't exist yet. He put another document out on Twitter that was from 1967, but again, that contract wasn't awarded until June of '67, so the production didn't start till afterward.
And as I understand it, the reporter from the Wall Street Journal, Joel Shetman, he was one of the two reporters that headlined this story and called it a bombshell. He initially posted a document which he said supported his claim that there was this EMP capability in 1967. But I think it was you that pointed out that that document was later taken down when you pointed out to him the fact that that document post-dated the incident that Bob Salas witnessed.
Yeah, initially I thought it was taken down, but I think it was the algorithms in Twitter kind of moved it off to the side somehow to where it wasn't discoverable every time I went looking for it. But still, the fact remains That was put out for contract in June 67. The incident happened in March 67, and that was for a proposed ICBM system that didn't even exist and never was produced. This was the Minuteman system.
Yeah. So, Mario, let's come to you. I mean, I know when you work in your role as a security officer in a nuclear missile site, you are obviously read into a lot of stuff about the importance of protecting the security of what is essentially the most important weapon in the American arsenal. It's a
Right.
thermonuclear weapon. It can essentially irradiate hundreds of square miles of Central America. And so, you've got to be very careful with these weapons. Just give me your gut response to the claim that all this was a secret EMP test and that you and anyone else that had been topside in that nuclear missile site that day wouldn't have noticed the kind of construction that Rob is talking about, that the contract actually says would have been required to have been built in 1967 for this to be true.
Ross, in South Dakota, we've seen buffalo coming from 20 miles away. You're on high prairie land, and it's flat, and your fence line is the highest thing around you. The state tree is a Bell telephone pole, and it's on a road somewhere. There is no way that anybody could approach us from any direction. These facilities are built to fight from. That's why, lights emanate, project outward. Your fence line is secure, barbed wire at the top. Everything is secure, but the main objective, for one, is to keep those guys in that capsule safe so they can turn those keys if necessary and fight off whatever we can to survive or get. Anyway, we are there to protect that resource, and we will do anything in order to do so. And it's not just us. We pick up a phone or a direct line to Wing Security Control that's back at a major base. You've got a 6-man fire team coming out in a helicopter, a QRT. You've got armored personnel carriers coming. You've got everything coming. These guys could not do that, what has been described. There's no possible way.
But knowing what you know about how careful, thank God, the US Air Force is with protecting these weapons, is there any conceivable possibility at all that somebody like Bob Salas wouldn't be briefed and read into a proposal to put even your wildest dreams an electromagnetic pulse through a missile site?
I often look, he and I, we have like a communion thing because he was an officer in which I protected, not him per se, but many others just like him. And I wonder, being he was a deputy down in that capsule, and I've been down there, I've been in the capsule and it's secure. And when they close that plug, you hear the vacuum and you're in a capsule and it's big enough that, you're okay, but they're far enough apart. Him being the deputy, I can only imagine what took place that night. He gets a call from upstairs from the flight security controller. And they say, "Sir, we've got something out here. We can't figure out what the hell it is. And it's glowing. It's huge. It's over our fence line, and we don't know what to do with it." And at the same time he gets that information, all of a sudden, his annunciator panel just starts blipping off, and that's directly related to his rockets that are out there miles away. The rockets are not where you are. You live at a launch control facility 3 days at a time and off for 4. I think they were 2 on, 2 off. I'm not sure, something like that. But there is no way, him getting that information, what went through that man's mind? And I often think that because I knew a lot of those officers, we played ping pong together out there in the sites. We had a little gym set up, it's not just go out there and you're just gung ho dude. You have fun while you can. You read a lot. You play backgammon. You hit ping pong. You read. There's all kinds of things to do. Of course, we only had 3 TV channels back then. But what I'm saying is I wonder what went through his mind when that flight security controller called him. And mind you, that FSC had to already notify Wing Security Control. So it wasn't just Lieutenant Salas in the capsule. There was also a captain down there. And he tells who that captain is. So with what was going on in his mind, how many hours passed when he came up that elevator for relief? Now there's 2 other officers upstairs. So they had to know what's going on too. It wasn't just surprise. He got told and saw what he saw. He said the flight security controller was curled up in a chair. I believe it because I've lived it.
But you're quite clear that there is absolutely no way. I mean, one of the things I do admire, I've actually toured a nuclear missile site in the United States, and I can remember the degree of security that we went through as a
Delta
TV
One,
crew.
Delta
Yeah,
One in South Dakota. Yeah.
yeah.
What do you think about the sign on the door?
It's the whole place is just terrifying. But the thing
No,
that really impressed me,
it's a Domino's pizza sign. It says, for let's see, delivery within 30 minutes or less, and the second one's free. And they painted on the whole blast door. You can't
yeah,
miss it. They got free Domino's pizzas for years when they put that on there.
sure.
I'm
But
sorry, I had to tell you that.
no, that's all right. That's fine. But the thing that really blew me away was there is just no way that you would surprise the earnest young officers that are trusted with this incredible weapon with any kind of surprise. Everybody has to know what's happening. The degree of briefing is intense. Rob, can I come to you for a moment? I'm interested in drawing you on the motives. Like, what do you think of the broad claim that is being made by Kirkpatrick and presumably a whole lot of people on background, including, by implication, Susan Gough, the Pentagon's PR woman, who's been one of the mouthpieces for the disinformation coming out of the Pentagon on this whole issue. What do you think of this explanation that essentially this has been a decades-long disinformation operation to protect sensitive weapons programs? I actually think there's some truth in that they have used the UAP subject to try to obscure stealth programs like the SR-71 and then later on the 117, all of the new stealth planes that have been developed. But I do not accept that, from what my witnesses are telling me, that this is the full explanation for what took place. What's your take?
Well, my understanding is it's illegal to perform information operations or psyops on the American people in contiguous United States. And Susan Go is a public affairs officer, but she was also a colonel in psyops career in the Army. So this is what she does for a living. And she helped write the plans, and she argued for a domestic information control. I understand there's legitimate concerns to need to mask black projects, but this is a continuation of trying to discount the UFO topic as anything other than mundane. And if there's nothing there, why are they going to such great lengths to discount it? Why wasn't the acting director?
Just to bolster what you're saying and referring to here, we're talking about Executive Order 12333, which essentially came out of the Church Commission in the 1970s, and it was essentially an order from the president that the United States intelligence community is not allowed to conduct intelligence operations against the American public, and that includes disinformation. So to make your point very, very clear, you have a former officer, or actually a serving officer in the US military, Susan Gough, in the Pentagon, supporting a claim being made by a civilian officer in the Pentagon, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, that there was a disinformation operation, a lie, where officers were induced to sign NDAs under threat of death if they revealed anything about this secret Yankee Blue program, which, according to Dr. Kirkpatrick, was a cover for secret weapons programs. It's just totally implausible, isn't it, that the United States would run such an active disinformation operation against its own officers?
Well, there's a clause that allows through the executive branch, if it's under the national security interest, that they would be allowed within certain constraints to do that. And they relaxed the Smith-Mundt Act in 2012, the Modernization Act, to allow for certain instances for what was previously foreign information operations to be facilitated in the United States and on U.S. citizens under the guise of national security. So they have a loophole through the White House that theoretically could allow this to take place if indeed there's substance here to the UFO topic and they need to guard it like they would nuclear secrets. Then that would justify their use of psyops on the American people. Otherwise, there's no legitimate excuse to be doing this.
In and of itself, though, I'm actually gobsmacked that the Pentagon has put this forward as an explanation. Because what they've done is they've implicitly admitted something that now requires investigation. I don't know what's
Mhm.
more serious, running a disinformation operation against its own officers and the public, or, as Mario has pointed out, the incredibly dangerous act of putting an electromagnetic pulse through a site that controls nuclear weapons. In and of itself, this must be investigated, mustn't it?
Absolutely. I wouldn't have my stash of July 4th fireworks and just, for curiosity's sake, go fire up my 5,000-watt generator and hook the jumper cables onto it and see what happens. And there's no metrology equipment that was installed on the base to figure out what the results were. I mean, taking 10 ICBMs offline with an EMP, they didn't know if they were going to come back online or not, and then you're compromising a whole wing of missiles. So it's just ludicrous at its face that they would do that, and there's no metrology equipment to test the results.
I mean, frankly, I would have hoped and expected that the officers that had ordered such an operation would have been put before a courts martial and asked to explain themselves. I mean, it's a gross dereliction of duty, isn't it, Mario, to put the strategic nuclear deterrence at risk with some kind of pulse weaponry without knowing the consequences?
No one has that authority. That's just the end of it. I mean, nobody has the authority to conduct such an experiment. Perhaps Sandia National Labs or some of the other laboratories, they may have done that, but not on an active in service uh, missile complex. There's just no way that they would be taken down in a test. There's no way.
I just want to deal with one thing. Bob Hastings, Robert Hastings, who's written the excellent book UFOs and Nukes and
Mhm.
done by far the most comprehensive analysis of these incidents involving UFOs and ICBM sites, nuclear missile sites. He talks about how there was a press conference that he was at in 2010 where a former Minuteman missile targeting officer stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base, Captain
Mhm.
Robert Jamison, was
Right.
involved in retargeting the 10 ICBMs that had actually been simultaneously knocked offline on that March evening that Bob Salas witnessed in 1967. And according to Captain Jamison, Bob says, multiple targeting teams, including his, were given an unprecedented special UFO briefing prior to them being released to the field, during which it was stated, quote, a UFO had caused the multiple missile failures, and they were instructed to report a UFO to their command post should one be sighted while they travelled to the full shutdown site at Oscar Flight, which was near Royan, Montana. And
Right.
they were further instructed that should a UFO appear while they were on site at one of the launch facilities, they were to quickly enter the silo and close the personnel hatch. So, do you find it at all plausible that the team that was being sent in to repair these missiles after they'd been knocked out by what Bob Salas says was a UFO, not an EMP pulse. Do you find it plausible that the US Air Force, after conducting supposedly an EMP test, would then send in a team without properly briefing them about what it was that had been done to those missiles?
Now, there's a possibility. There honestly is a possibility, but they could not get underground to get to that missile by themselves. It would take security personnel there. There's a
Sure.
whole bunch of clearances and authorization to even get down into a silo. You have three different plugs that you've got to go through to get there, and nobody has all the combinations for all three. So they did do work like that by opening the silo, pulling the missile out, putting it in a trailer that concealed its view from anybody driving by, and it was shielded from what I understand. And work was done inside these trailers. You can Google those trailers if they carried them in, and placed the missile back. I don't know if that could be done or not, but just the security measures to get to and from, and then you said to close a personnel hatch. Well, there's a whole lot more to it than just closing the door.
Rob, why the hell have they come out now with this dopey, daffy, block headed explanation for the cover up? Why? It's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. All it's going to do, surely, is blow up in their face because, as members of Congress have indicated, they're going to be very, very aggressively investigating the UAP issue over coming months.
Well, we walk this back to David Grush's testimony, the whistleblower that was the most senior whistleblower ever on this topic. in July 26, 2023, to Congress, where he testified that there's an illegal off-book SAP program that is retrieving and reverse engineering UAP. And with him being a staffer now with Burleson's office, I think there's momentum gaining to where they're, and the FBI now is coming online, where I think the DoD is starting to lose control of this narrative, and I think they're afraid that the truth may come out, and they're trying to do damage control and throw everything they can at it to try and suppress it at 11th hour save, to keep their programs under wraps. Because the let's just say that there is legitimacy to this topic, and we do have craft and bodies and reverse engineered tech, that would be exponentially higher state secrets than the nuclear secrets would be. So they're going all in to try and keep this concealed, and it's been such a decades long secret. Even the senior commanders and such don't know anymore that these exist.
But the thing I find most sinister about this is, according to the article, one of the people that was fed what I suspect is a disinformation line from the Pentagon was the Director of National Intelligence herself, Avril Haines. And we've got Tulsi Gabbard now in the DNI role. Do you think Tulsi Gabbard is going to buy this explanation if she's offered it by the Pentagon?
There's not been any documentation to support any of the assertions in the Wall Street Journal or the narratives that the PAO office through Susan Go and them. Nothing has been publicly documented. And Kirkpatrick said he briefed Avril Haines in 2023 on the the Yankee Blue program, and with the NDAs that they had to sign for life, or they'll get executed supposedly with the hazing ritual. But there was nothing in the official report. And if this narrative is true, then why isn't the existing director of Aero out acknowledging this instead of the former?
It's very interesting the way they've used Kirkpatrick, isn't it? And I notice subtly the Wall Street Journal used Ms. Goff, Susan Goff, to basically support Kirkpatrick's claims. But it's interesting. I don't know whether Dr. John Kozlowski, who I am told is a good man and who is increasingly being given a lot of evidence that is, I'm sure, upsetting the apple cart beside the Pentagon, I don't know whether he'd be so willing to be part of the cover-up. What worries me is, why now? Obviously, you're saying that we're at a time when the push from Congress is tightening the noose around those who have engineered this cover-up for so long. It does tend to indicate, though, that they're digging in for a fight, and that they're willing to lie to the most senior people in the US intelligence establishment. That's the implication, surely, isn't it, of what we're seeing here? They're using one of the most powerful papers in the United States to essentially push a line that includes disinformation fed, presumably not just to the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, but also to the White House. Is our president being misled? Is Donald Trump being told the truth about UAPs? What do you gentlemen think?
If I may, Ross, I think, I don't think it's all within the military. I think it's in the military-industrial complex, which I worked for 14 years. I think they make direct instructions on what they're going to do with this widget or that widget or what they're doing, and whoever's down the line doing their reporting in their official offices or what have you, they're being told what to do. And they're being told what to say. I believe we have technology. There's no doubt in my mind, because what I saw was technology that we can't even imagine yet. And I can't imagine the rest of it.
Well, Mary, I can't let you go without I can't let you go without you telling me some of your story. What did you see that night?
Well, a craft, honestly, the size of a Walmart building. And it was like a red, white, yellow plasma sitting 5 to 10 feet on top of a blast door, 1 o'clock in the morning on November 5 missile site. We got the call actually at about 12:05 p.m. that night, or a.m. that night. And we responded. We were at November Control, which is 7 miles away from November 1. And travel time was about 15 minutes. And this thing was a sit-4, so it was a 2-pronged alarm, just real quick. uh, upon departing the site. And I had seen this thing earlier that night and flipped facility lights at it. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was B-52 bombers doing low sortie flights.
Was it a solid object? Was it a hard object or just a plasma?
Well, I didn't see any tail section. I didn't see any type of portholes. I saw no fins, controlling surfaces whatsoever. It was an absolute sphere, as if it was on fire, or like if you see a welder's light and that plasma effect off of it. There's something in the middle of it, and it's huge. It was just gargantuan, and it displaced the atmosphere. It took the air away. It put a pressure on mine and my partner's chest. It felt like I was being pulled up into the back seat of the vehicle. Uh, and this all happened within a few seconds on the site arrival. And we pulled up at a 45-degree angle, 60 to 80 feet from the gate at November 5, which is still there today. Uh, I didn't know what to do. I mean, the words just can't even come to your mind. And I literally grabbed what I thought was a mag light, but of course they didn't make them commercially till 79. I've been corrected. 77, I had a 3D cell aluminum light. I pulled myself up on the windowsill. I had a mitten on this hand, on my left hand, and I didn't have anything on my right hand, so I could activate the flashlight. And I just went across the blue bubbles of the vehicle, and why I flashed the lights at it, I had flashed my flashlight at this gargantuan thing. I don't know, but the same thing that I'd done at November Control when I pulled people out there, Michael Johnson out there to see this thing. And but the next thing I know, I slid down on the seat, and this black ball, about 6 times the size of a beach ball, it just came out of nowhere, right down in front on the hood of the truck, and it had no words for it. It had vents all the way around it. Uh, I don't know. It was just so fast, and they went straight up, straight down, around the left, around the right, came back, and it was gone. Then a smell just simply overtook me. To smell like shrimp, like iodine. I was raised in Tampa, Florida, so we used to always fish. I smelled this shrimp smell, just really strong, and I thought, "What is that?" And at the same time, as I was sitting in the seat, when I flashed that flashlight at it, and I sat down in the seat, I told Michael Johnson, I said, "It's going to be okay now." Why I said that, I don't know. But it seemed as if everything in that vehicle was just slowed down to nothing. I could see particles, and because it was so illuminated inside the vehicle, I could see like particles coming out of the vent work of that F-154 pickup truck. That was our response vehicle. Security police standard pickup truck, 2-wheel drive. And then that smell. And then the next thing I know, I got my weapon between my legs, and I knew something was on the right side of me. And it gives me chills right now, because I had rolled my window up, and I knew I only had an 1/8 inch piece of glass between me and whatever was out there.
And
Even
that was
though
some kind of being, some kind of
4
non-human
of
being.
them, yeah, 3 small and 1 tall. So I've seen them too. I've smelled them and I've seen them. And I know exactly what they look like. And I do have some drawings of them. And believe me, it freaks me out right now. It really does. And it's very difficult, because I couldn't talk about that in my debriefing. And in my debriefing, I told the commander every single thing, but there's so much more to it. We really need to discuss it. This takes a while, and I'm sorry to tell you. But that's the last thing I remember until I woke up. We were in total light, super light. And all of a sudden, the next thing I know, I popped my eyes open, and we're in total darkness. And I told Michael Johnson, I said, "Where the hell are we? What's going on?" Because we were just at November 5. And I reached down and grabbed that door because he wasn't talking to me. I didn't know what was wrong with him. I hadn't figured it out yet. And I had bunny boots on, rubber boots, that for cold. It was 9 to 13 degrees that night. So the ground was frozen, some snow on the ground. And I stepped out in mud on my right foot. And I go, "What?" I said, "What the hell?" And then the radio cracked to life, and it said, "Wing security control to November 1. And I said, "Are you going to get that?" Thinking he just wasn't been talking. He was completely frozen to that steering wheel, Ross. Completely frozen, eyes open, breathing. I mean, it was the strangest thing I've ever seen in my life, a human being lock up like that. And there was a white wall.
And you were 10 miles from where you'd been
Nine
previously.
and a half miles.
His vehicle was sitting facing out on a single lane beside a concrete wall at the reservoir,
Just
and
the
there was no
backside of
trucks. So he was pointing out
Yeah,
And
it was pointing the only way it could exit. You couldn't have gone in there with a 2-wheel drive vehicle and turned around. And behind me was a slough, but I didn't know what that white wall was, because as far as I could see behind me, because it was dark, and as far as I could see in front of me, it was a white wall, but it was at an angle. And as it got lighter, it occurred to me, I said, what time is it? And I looked at my watch, and it was like 6 a.m. So we'd arrived at the site at 1 a.m., thereabouts. And next thing I know, it's 6 a.m. And I can't get Michael Johnson to talk at all until they're looking for us.
So you got 5 hours of missing time, and you have no recollection of what transpired between the moment when the object clearly engaged with you and when you found yourself waking up at the dam site 9.5 miles distant.
Correct. Until hypnosis, and that put me in AFib. So if people tell you that they can't be hypnotized, don't believe it, because right now I'm shaking. But until I was hypnotized, and that was Robert Hastings and Jared Tarbell took care of that for me and arranged that. He's my mentor.
When was that, Mario?
2017, 2018, I think. I can't remember, but I have a copy of the DVD until I did it again in 23.
Mario, can I ask you this? You're clearly being gaslit by your own government. I mean, that's the thing I find so shabby about this is...
It gets a lot worse. If I told you the personal outcome of all this, you wouldn't believe it. You just wouldn't believe it. And I mean, if you're enlisted, it's one thing. If you're an officer, it's another thing. And you ask anybody in any service, will tell you the same thing. The way you're treated is directly related to where you're an officer or you're enlisted. And Tulsi Gabbard or anybody can't tell me any different. She was an officer, and she would be handled completely different than what I was handled in my partner, Michael Johnson. And we've been looking for him for 47 years. A lot of money's been spent trying to find him with no luck. Rob searched for him. I've had all kinds of people search for him. There's even been paid investigators looking for him. And he told me he lived in Chicago, or his parents did. He was single when he came to mine and my wife's apartment in Rapid City. And I was at Ellsworth in South Dakota, not North Dakota, by the way.
And you and your wife had a conversation with Michael Johnson, your colleague that night, who basically confirmed the experience.
Yeah. And she recently did that also on with a podcast that I did on Limitless podcast. He communicated with her and she talked about that.
But can I just ask you this? I'm trying to get a bit of the emotional thing for you. You've had your credibility attacked for year after year after year because you've stuck to your story. You've basically said, in the face of skeptical debunkers, including this latest one in the Wall Street Journal, you've stuck to your story that you were in some way taken, that you were moved by some kind of perhaps non-human intelligence that night. What does it feel like to be called a liar by your own government?
You know, they've done about their worst, so I don't really give a damn what they do any longer. I pay my taxes, I work a job, I'll be 70 in September, and I hope to retire by next April. I want to race my RC cars, go to the range all the time and shoot like I do, fish, and enjoy life. I don't really care what they do, what they say. I don't really care if Congress calls me or not. They have twice, but they've never gone through with it. You know why? Because they have to get the pedigrees and the degrees out of the way first. They cannot deal with first-hand experiencers. Name one that they've dealt with. None. Am I right or wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. And this
That's
is
right.
the thing,
they can't
Rob,
deal with that.
Yeah, this is the thing, Rob, that I think is absolutely fundamental to this lame attempt in this Wall Street Journal article to debunk the whole
I
issue.
asked Kirkpatrick, I challenged him. I said, you sit me down and talk to me any part about anything that you want to ask me that happened that night, and I can tell you. Through hypnosis, I can tell you more. Through the secondary hypnosis with Yvonne Smith in LA, I can tell you a whole lot more. And I have marks on my body. That night I was burned on the top of my face, on the top of my head right here, and on the back of my hand, which the flight surgeons took samples off of me, and Michael Johnson. The other thing, you heard of Rick Doty?
Yes, I know of Rick Doty. I'm not quite sure whether to believe him or not.
No, I hear you. And it's a very hard thing. Well, he lives in my history. And he lives in my history as that day in Colonel Spraker's office that I was taken by Master Sergeant Gray to the SATAF building at Ellsworth Air Force Base, an hour and 15-minute ride back from November Control. When I walked in or reported in, had to be the very formal way, knocking on the door frame. the whole 9 yards, pronouncing myself and everything else. He was sitting at his desk. I walked in, saluted, stated my name, everything else about me. Rick Doty was the junior officer in OSI sitting next to a Captain Jack Reed. Then there was a man in a tweed suit. Then there was a deputy base commander. And then there was Colonel Spraker. And then it started right there. So I was told by somebody who's very credible to me and I look up to that it may have been a time during his career to where he was just starting out and perhaps he didn't embellish on anything that, which came later as he was kind of known for. So that's the way I have to take it, and I can't do anything about it. It took me 5.5 years to get an email from him, and now we email once in a while. We were also on a podcast together.
So Doty's admitted that he was there that day, that he met.
Yeah, that's correct. He was tasked with getting our medical records from the flight surgeon's office.
And were you ever able to get those medical records that proved the burns on your forehead?
I couldn't get them. I've done everything I can to obtain those records or anything written. I'm currently in a reevaluation with the VA because I do have some medical problems, and that part I just cannot. I just can't access or Freedom of Information Act. I just can't get my records or all my training records even.
Mario and Rob, the key issue behind the Wall Street Journal article is it leaves the reader with the impression that there is no first-hand evidence. Rob, how much first-hand evidence has there been, including from witnesses who've given evidence under oath, asserting that there is a legacy retrieval program of non-human technology that's secretly attempting to reverse engineer that technology?
This goes clear back to Kehoe in the 50s, that we've had senior enlisted and officers in the military and government and civilians that have expressed firsthand evidence and testimonies throughout each decade. This is cyclic. I mean, David Grush was not the first senior intelligence person to come forward with this, and he was able to state later in 23 with Charles McCullough in a BBC interview that he had indeed seen firsthand evidence of some sort to prove this. So it wasn't the Wall Street Journal is trying to frame a narrative, reverse engineer it, that this is all a small group of people within the government, the DoD, that have constructed a false narrative, and it's all circular reporting with no supporting evidence that they have amplified through the decades to this culmination of what they say is this hazing incident of Yankee Blue or whatever they call it, to completely delegitimize all the sincere efforts, suffering, and everything that all these people have testified before. But we've got the serviceman from Rendlesham Forest that is now getting benefits because of his injury sustained for the government. So that legitimized that there were anomalous effects from exposure to these.
This is the thing that worries me at the moment, though, that you've got evidence from people like you, Mario, you've got evidence, as you say, Rob, from David Grush, who has actually told the BBC that he does have first-hand evidence that he's happy to testify about in a secret skiff hearing.
And 40 more behind him.
You've got Lekatsky, you've got Jay Stratton, who I quoted earlier, you've got Lou Elizondo. All of these people are saying they have first-hand evidence, and some of them have actually testified to the accuracy of what they're saying under oath. So now we have a situation where you have the Pentagon, Sean Kirkpatrick, Susan Goh, the PR woman for the Pentagon, making one claim, and you have a whole host of other people who've had the guts to put their record on the record under oath. It's time those two stories were tested. Yes. There's an opportunity here, isn't there, for the Pentagon's veracity to finally be tested. I wonder if this Wall Street Journal article won't be seen as a tipping point where the Pentagon finally went too far. It overdid it overplayed its hand. Do you suspect they have overplayed their hand here?
Absolutely, and I think the suppression of investigating David Grush's ICIG whistleblower complaint and the other 40 witnesses that were First-hand witnesses that were either members currently or formerly of the legacy program in question. The suppression of that investigation alone speaks volumes. I think, people ask me a lot what would be the best opportunity to try and crack this open as far as the government acknowledging that this is legitimate. I think it would be pushing for those whistleblower complaints to be that investigation to be followed up through, because no one to date has been able to discount David Grush's testimony, and instead they attack his credibility by allegedly leaking where to find the FOIA documents through that certain reporter that I don't want to mention his name, to impugn him for his PTSD incidents that he had through legitimate service. So they're trying to attack the messenger. Why would they do that if there's nothing there?
So, Mario, in closing, and thank you to both you and Rob for coming on Reality Check today. Mario, you've already, I know, come forward multiple times to give your evidence. But if you were asked to swear in a court, in the Congress, on a stack of Bibles, knowing that you face perjury, prosecution for telling a falsehood, would you testify to the veracity of what you've told me today?
Every word, yes. I've raised my hand many a time and taken that oath, and I'd be happy to do it again.
Have
No.
you ever had a fair hearing for what you say happened to you that day, that evening in 1977? Have you ever been given the opportunity to have a fair hearing before a proper inquiry?
No, never.
Do you get the impression the US Air Force, the Pentagon, and some in the US government just want people like you to go away?
Yes. Yeah, they're afraid. They really are afraid. I've had black sedans cruise in front of my neighborhood, cutting the grass, and take pictures of me. I don't know. There was a government vehicle. I know that. I pay my taxes. I pay my bills. So, but I do know that happened. It happened prior to going out to Robert's place, as a matter of fact.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much to both of you for coming on Reality Check and going through the detail of why part one of the Wall Street Journal hatchet job was a complete joke. There is going to be a part two, and apparently that's going to be a hatchet job on Lou Elizondo. So let's see what they come up with in that one. But I suspect, based on part one, it's going to be a pretty miserable effort. Thank you again to both of you gentlemen. And before we go, please don't forget to send in any questions you have for me to realitycheck@newsnationnow.com. Looking forward to answering your questions as best as we can.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.